Hi everyone, this is Ivan, and I'm going to be doing a quick overview of my song from November 2020 Dwelling of Duels Jazz vs. Funk Month, and this was a cover of Corridors of Time from Chrono Trigger. So just a quick look at the project. Here we have the drums and the synths, some strings, brass, and finally the live instruments, the bass and guitars, including Sixto's guitars. He collaborated with me on this. And at the end, some reverbs, which I'll explain later. And just a few quick words how I came up with this arrangement. So I was listening to a lot of city pop, J-pop, K-pop, which has that 80s disco funky vibe. So I thought I would do something in that style, and I noticed a lot of those songs start on the fourth chord. I thought, well, what song can I come up with that starts on the fourth chord? And Corridors of Time first popped into my mind, and yeah, I decided I'd cover it. So yeah, it turned out okay. Won third place in Jazz versus Funk Month, so I guess it's okay. So let's start with the drums. For the drums, I've used Native Instruments Battery 4, and this plugin comes with a ton of sounds. So I just used the electro kit, and I added some of my own samples. For example, this is the main kick that plays throughout the song. You can see sort of modern, but with some processing, you can get it close to that dancey style, old school. So let's get on to the processing. First, we have the snare. The snare goes through some EQ, rolling up the low end, boosting the low mids, doing some cuts here because of some nasty frequencies, and boosting the highs. And that goes through a compressor. This compressor is just used to, as you can see, uh, attack low, release low, just to get that initial peak a bit tamed. Next up we have the kick. And the kick also goes to some EQ, cutting off the very low end, the noise down there, which we don't need. Boosting the lows a bit, doing some cuts here and in the highs, and making some more space in the middle. Goes through Reacomp. I just used the preset here and tweaked it a little. The steady rock kick preset worked fine for the purposes. But these drum sounds from Battery 4 are fine by themselves, so there isn't really that need for too much processing. The kick also goes through Supercharger just for a bit of extra compression and saturation. And next up, the toms. I routed all the toms through the same channel to make my life simpler, and they aren't doing too much throughout the song, so there wasn't really any need for making them all each into their own separate channel. So the toms go through this EQ and some saturation and just some clipping to make them not pop out too much. Next we have the clap channel, just rolling off the high end and getting rid of some harsh frequencies here in the upper mids. Cymbals are just, bypassed, removing all the nasty low end. And also the snare, the toms, and the clap have their own gated reverb channels, so just a room reverb, plate reverb in the case of toms, and for the claps also gated room reverb, just for that 80s sound. Now we also have this channel where everything else goes, so the hats, shakers, stuff like that. And you can see on this, these are all mostly hats, so I just rolled off the low end, added boost here, cutting off the highs because they were harsh. Yes, pretty simple stuff. These all channels go into two channels. So this is the unprocessed and processed channel. On the processed channel, I do some heavy compression. You can see a high ratio, just squashing them, and then also doing some tape saturation for even more squashing and adding some harmonics. Then I mix these two channels into this last one, which only has a clipper, which I pushed until it reached the clipping point. And yeah, the drums overall sound pretty good. You can hear. Simple stuff. But what I wanted to say earlier, I forgot. This very arrangement is simple, so there aren't many things clashing with each other, and since I didn't use a real drum kit or trying to make it sound real, it was a lot simpler, and these samples are already good on their own. Yeah, not much processing there. So next up we have the synths. The first synth is this bell pad, for which I used Massive X, just a preset. This goes through a cutting off the low end and also cutting off these upper mids to make space for everything else, since this pad plays throughout the whole song, just sort of as a background effect. And it also has this pumper, one-knob pumper waves, which gives it sort of a side chaining effect, even though I didn't do side chaining with the kick. So it just doing some rhythmic stuff throughout the song. You can hear. Yeah, just a simple dancey vibe. Next we have the ARP synth. This is just playing the arpeggios from the source tune. I used Massive, this sort of a saw wave sound. This here EQ is used as a sweeping effect, so I automate the frequency and make it sweep in the intro of the song. This all goes through a delay and the main EQ, which cuts off the low end, and it has a cut here in the middle, make space for other stuff, a little bit of a boost here in the highs. Yes, this sounds like this. You can hear the sweeping. So yeah, that's it for that synth. Next up we have this super saw, for which I used OBXD. This is a freeware plugin, or maybe donationware, I'm not sure. And I used just a jump preset, Van Halen, everyone knows that. So cutting off the low end, getting rid of the middle to make space for other instruments, boosting the upper mids a bit, and just some light compression. And this is playing simple lines throughout the whole song. So yeah, just some octaves plus a few other things. Yeah, something like that. Repeated. Next up, we have the lead synth. Again, this is a massive preset Rudesk, and goes through an EQ. Got rid of a bit of the high end because the preset itself has a lot of high end, and again, getting rid of the lows. Yeah, this was a fine sound just by itself. A nice, sweet lead sound. This is just a noise channel used for some effect with the automation. For that, I also have this FX channel up here, which has some risers. Yeah, you gotta build up more hype for some sections of the song. Next up is this bell lead, which just doubles some chorus parts. Yeah, a simple lead, again massive, no processing here needed at all. And next up, this synth doubles the bass in some parts. As you can see, massive, just another preset, a bassy sound, but I got rid of the very low end, not to make it clash with anything, and just a bit of chorus to make it stick. And yeah, like I said, it doubles the bass guitar. Just for an effect, to give it a bit of a boost in some parts. Next, this is just a lead, barely noticeable lead, but to fill up some high end in the parts, providing sort of a counterpoint to the main lead. You heard this sound a million times, so it is just a simple synth with almost no processing, just getting rid of the low end junk. And finally, this synth, which I haven't named, but this just doubles the leads. Just doubling the leads during the chorus. And again, massive X, some preset, piano sounding. Massive X is very, very good and has a ton of great presets, which is of course always a plus. So yeah, some EQ, getting rid of the low end and cutting off the mids a bit to make space for the guitars, which also play these parts. And some compression, light compression. And again, going through delay. Some of the other synths here I didn't mention. I didn't have to add delay because the presets have delay built into themselves. So that's another neat thing about Massive and Massive X. So next up, we're done with the synths. Next up we have the strings. I separated the strings into staccato and long strings to make my life easier. So I don't have to do any key switching, stuff like that. And I used Spitfire Intimate strings for the staccato and Spitfire Epic strings for the long strings. They are both pretty similar sounding, running both in Spitfire's audio engine. For these long strings, I just removed the low end, gave it a little bit of a boost in the highs. And for the staccato strings, I got rid of some of the mids to make space for the lower strings and also other instruments for long strings. But the long strings are playing lower parts, and gave it a boost here in the high end just for some sparkle. And next up is the brass. The brass, I used Native Instruments session horns for that. Yeah, I wanted that cheesy brass sound, nothing too realistic, something like play on a workstation. So this goes through a bit of saturation, then a doubler to make it wider and give it more punch, going through some reverb, and this EQ, getting rid of the low end, and just some nasty frequencies here in the highs and here in the mids around 1K, making space for other stuff. And again, this is an effect, again, a sweep, which also happens during the intro, just automated frequency. So yeah, that's it for the brass. The brass, I should probably play these so you can see what lines they're playing, both the strings and the brass. you can see that they are kind of clashing with each other, but it has a purpose. I didn't want them to be playing the same thing, and in some parts they are completely separated, so you can hear distinctively what each of them plays. So next up we have the live instruments, and as you can see I separated the bass into finger and slap. The processing is pretty similar on both, but I kept them separated because it was much easier to mix them that way. So yeah, bass goes through bass rider to keep the levels even. Gate, don't want the noise coming through and nothing should be playing. Then this DK amp plugin. I was wondering if I should use BOD, but this one sounded better for this song. And goes through, this isn't a compressor, this is a sidechain. As you can see, I have the auxiliary input routed in here, so the kick triggers this and ducks the bass whenever the kick hits. This goes through an EQ. This is just some preset I found and tweaked a little to fit my needs, to make it a bit brighter, getting rid of these low mids to make space for other stuff, and getting rid of the junk at the very low end. Going through some heavy compression and saturation, and finally a clipper. I wanted to keep levels as even as possible throughout the whole song. So yeah, similar processing goes in this slap bass and bass rider, gate, GK amplification, sidechain rear comp to duck the bass when the kick hits. And as the EQ here is a lot different. So we got a boost in the low end. The slap bass is pretty bright by itself, so I gave it a little bit of a boost, cutting off some around 160 to make it less boomy, and getting rid of the very high end because again the slap bass is bright, so gotta not make it too harsh, make it easy to listen to. Going through some compression with some saturation also turned on, and again more saturation here, but just light. And this also gets clipped. So yeah, keeping the levels fairly even. And you can hear how this sounds. Sounds a bit bright on its own, both the finger and the slap bass, but in the context of the song, the kick is providing most of the low end, so there wasn't really much need for other stuff. Next we have my leads. So this is just my guitars going through Mercurial Spark plugin and some compression. And I have the left and right leads separated. They are playing the harmony, the main harmony from the source. Like I said earlier, these leads are doubled by the synth, and they go through this just simple EQ, getting rid of some very high frequencies and the very low frequencies, and going through a plate reverb for some sparkle and just for an effect. And that's it. These two just play throughout the chorus. Next up we have the rhythm guitars. So again, using Spark, going through again a little bit of compression and EQ. These guitars play throughout the whole song, so I cut off the mids to make space for everything else. Got rid of the low end, and I wanted to use my Fender for this, but I recorded a draft with my Ibanez, and it sounded pretty good, so I didn't bother re-recording it with the other guitar. My Fender has a bit of more focused sound, but this was fine, so I didn't want to re-record anything. Next up we have Sixto's guitar. Not much process here, just some light compression in 2 stages to make it just to get rid of some peaks, and yeah, his guitar sounds good on its own, so didn't really have to do much. Yeah, it's Sixto. What else would you expect? And that's it as far as guitars go. So I explained these 3 reverbs, but this last one, room reverb, I route everything else through this just for some mix glue. You can see cymbals, pads, most of the synths, staccato strings, long strings, brass, so everything that doesn't have its own reverb gets routed through this. And yeah, this all goes into a master channel, which has Brainworks refinement. Just this plugin is used to get rid of some harsh frequencies. And I use it really light, but you can get some heavy, deep, harsh effects with this. And this finally goes to Ozone, where I have an exciter, just adding a bit of sparkle. Gotta have that sparkle. Imager, making the low end just a bit tighter and the mids and the highs wider. Some dynamic EQ to make the maximizer less pumping, and the maximizer, I didn't give it too much of a boost. As you can see, mostly the threshold is crossed mostly by just the ceiling is crossed mostly by the kick and the snare, and not much else. So there isn't too much squashing going on on the master channel. And that's it for this project file. Hope you enjoyed this quick overview. And like I said, the arrangement itself is doing most of the work here as far as the mix goes. So there really wasn't much to show, but I hope it was enough to give you some ideas for the future. And stay tuned for the rest of Dwelling of streams, and see ya.